It was just another Monday morning, but for her it felt like walking into a spotlight she never asked for. She had spent the weekend getting ready, not just her books and uniform, but herself. For the first time in a long while, she felt proud of who she was. Her hair was big, wild, soft, and full of life. It framed her face like a crown she finally decided to wear out in public. She walked through the school gates with her backpack slung over one shoulder, trying to ignore the looks. Some kids stared, some whispered, and a few even pointed. But she held her head high. This was her choice. Her body, her hair, her power. Inside the classroom, things didn't get much better. The teacher gave her a polite smile, but didn't stop the girl in the back row from making a comment loud enough for everyone to hear. "Wow, did your hair wake up angry this morning or something?" A few kids giggled. She ignored it. She told herself it wasn't worth reacting to, that if she stayed calm, maybe they'd get bored and leave her alone. But that girl, the one with the sharp tongue and a group of friends always laughing at her jokes, kept at it. Every day there was something new. "Your hair looks like a bird's nest. You forget to brush it, or did it run away from home?" It started as annoying, then became tiring, and slowly it turned into something heavier. Still, she tried not to make a scene. She figured if she didn't give them a reaction, they'd stop. But it only made them bolder. One afternoon during class, she was focused on her notebook, drawing little stars in the corner when she heard a whisper behind her. Then, a tug. Her hand flew to her head. A chunk of her hair was gone. Just gone. She spun around, heart pounding, and saw the smirk on that girl's face. In her hand was a pair of scissors. The room went quiet. Some kids gasped. Others looked away. One even laughed. Before she could say anything, the teacher walked in. And instead of asking what happened, she looked straight at her. "What's going on here? Why are you causing trouble again?" "I didn't do anything," she shot back, voice shaking. The teacher crossed her arms. "I don't have time for drama. Go sit down." She couldn't believe it. She had just been attacked, her hair cut without permission, and she was the one being punished. Tears welled up, but she blinked them away. She wasn't going to cry. Not here. Not now. When the bell rang, she packed up slowly, trying to hold it together. Her friend came over and gently touched the bald spot. "You okay?" she asked softly. She nodded, even though she wasn't. "Yeah," she lied. That night she sat on her bed staring at the mirror. The afro she had worked so hard to grow, the hair she had finally learned to love. Now ruined. Not by accident. Not by mistake. On purpose. She picked up her phone and typed a message to her dad. It happened again. Worse this time. He replied almost instantly. "I'm coming." The next day at school felt heavier than usual. She woke up early, staring at her reflection in the mirror again. The uneven cut was impossible to ignore. No matter how she styled it, the bald spot stuck out like a sore thumb. She thought about covering it with a hat or scarf, but deep down she didn't want to hide. This wasn't her fault. Why should she have to? Still, walking into school that morning took every ounce of courage she had. The hallway buzzed with whispers as soon as she stepped inside. Some kids pointed. Others laughed behind their hands. A few even mimicked cutting motions with their fingers, pretending to snip invisible hair. It stung more than she expected. By the time she reached her locker, her chest felt tight. She tried to remind herself that these people didn't matter. Their opinions didn't define her, but it was hard not to let their words creep under her skin. When one boy called her Patchy as he passed by, she clenched her fists so hard her nails dug into her palms. Her first class was English. Sitting in the back corner, she kept her head down, hoping to blend into the walls. The teacher handed out essays they'd written last week, and when hers landed on her desk, she saw the grade circled in red, an A+. Normally, that would have made her smile. Today, it barely registered. Then came lunch. She usually sat with her best friend, who always knew how to cheer her up. But today, even her friend seemed unsure of what to say. "Are you okay?" Her friend asked quietly, poking at her sandwich. She shrugged. I guess. Her friend hesitated before adding, You know it's not your fault, right? What happened? It's messed up. She nodded but didn't respond. Deep down, she knew her friend was right. None of this was her fault, but knowing something and feeling it were two different things. Right now, all she could feel was small. After lunch, she went to science class. That's where everything had started yesterday, where it happened. As she walked in, she noticed the girl from before already sitting there, surrounded by her usual group. They were giggling about something, and when they saw her, they stopped. For a second, their eyes locked. Then the girl smirked and turned away. Science class dragged on forever. The teacher talked about ecosystems and food chains, but she couldn't focus. Her mind kept replaying the moment from yesterday. The tug, the snip, the laughter. She hated how powerless she'd felt. Hated how everyone acted like it was nothing. When the bell finally rang, signaling the end of class, she bolted out of the room. She needed fresh air. Needed space. Outside, she found a quiet bench near the basketball court and sat down, pulling her knees to her chest. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. But peace didn't last long. A shadow fell over her, blocking the sun. She opened her eyes to see the same girl standing there, flanked by two of her friends. The smirk was back. What's wrong? The girl said, voice dripping with fake sweetness. Cat got your tongue? She stayed silent, refusing to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. The girl tilted her head, pretending to study her. Oh, wait, I get it. You're mad because I gave you a haircut. Relax, it's just hair. It'll grow back eventually. Her friends burst into laughter, like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. She felt a lump rise in her throat, but she swallowed it down. Crying wouldn't help. Fighting back wouldn't either. At least not here. Not now. Instead, she stood up, grabbed her bag, and walked away without saying a word. She could hear them laughing behind her, but she didn't look back. Every step felt heavier than the last, but she kept moving. She told herself she was stronger than this, smarter than this, better than this. That evening, she waited anxiously for her dad to come home. He'd promised to visit the school today, and she hoped he'd done something, anything, to make them listen, to make them understand. When he finally walked through the door, his expression said it all. He looked calm, but there was fire in his eyes. They blamed you, he said, voice low and steady. They actually blamed you. She nodded, tears threatening to spill over. Yeah. He pulled her into a hug, holding her tight. We're gonna fix this, he promised. Together. She wanted to believe him, she really did, but after everything that had happened, hope felt fragile, like glass ready to shatter. Her dad sat her down and explained his plan. First, he'd talk to the principal again. If that didn't work, he'd go higher, to the school board, the media, anyone who would listen. He wasn't going to let this slide. Not anymore. For the first time in days, she felt a flicker of strength return. Maybe they couldn't change the past. Maybe they couldn't undo what had been done. But they could fight for justice. And maybe, just maybe, they could make sure it never happened to anyone else. That night, as she lay in bed, she stared at the ceiling and thought about tomorrow, about what might happen next, about whether things would ever get better. And though fear still lingered, she clung to one truth. She wasn't alone. Her dad was with her. Her friend was with her. And somewhere, deep inside, she realized she was beginning to stand up for herself too. The next morning, she woke up feeling a mix of hope and dread. Hope because her dad had promised to fight for her. Dread because she knew the school wouldn't change its mind easily. She got dressed quietly, avoiding the mirror this time. The uneven cut still stared back at her no matter how much she tried to ignore it. Breakfast was silent. Her dad didn't push her to talk, but she could tell he was thinking about what to say next. Finally, as they were about to leave, he turned to her and said, No matter what happens today, remember this. You did nothing wrong. She nodded, clutching her backpack straps tightly. Deep down, she wanted to believe him. But after everything that had happened, trust felt like something fragile, something that could break with just one more bad day. When they arrived at school, her dad marched straight to the principal's office. She followed behind, feeling small but determined. The secretary glanced up from her desk, surprised to see them so early. "Can I help you?" the secretary asked politely. "I'm here to speak with the principal," her dad replied firmly. His voice carried authority without being aggressive. "It's urgent." The secretary hesitated, then picked up the phone to call ahead. A few moments later, the door to the principal's office opened, and out stepped Dr. Langston, a tall man with glasses perched on his nose and a clipboard tucked under his arm. He looked surprised to see them too. "Good morning," he began cautiously. "What brings you here?" Her dad wasted no time. "We need to discuss what happened yesterday. My daughter was attacked in class, and instead of addressing it properly, your staff blamed her. That's unacceptable." Dr. Langston frowned, clearly uncomfortable. "I understand your concerns, but we're handling the situation appropriately." "Appropriately?" her dad repeated, his voice rising slightly. "How is blaming the victim appropriate? How is letting the bully walk away without consequences fair?" She stood beside him, heart pounding. She'd never seen her dad like this before. Calm but fierce, protective but respectful. It gave her strength. Dr. Langston sighed and gestured for them to step inside his office. Once seated, he explained, or rather justified, the school's decision. The other student claimed it was a joke gone wrong. "We've spoken to both parties and issued warnings. Moving forward, we'll monitor the situation closely." Her dad leaned forward, eyes locked on the principal. "A joke? Cutting someone's hair without permission isn't a joke. It's an act of aggression, and issuing warnings doesn't fix anything. What are you doing to ensure this doesn't happen again?" Dr. Langston shifted in his chair, clearly caught off guard by her dad's persistence. "We can arrange mediation between the students if that would help." "No," her dad said firmly. "Mediation implies both sides share equal blame. This isn't about misunderstanding, it's about accountability. Your school failed my daughter, and I won't let that slide." She watched the exchange silently, amazed at how her dad refused to back down. For weeks, she'd felt powerless, invisible. Now, sitting beside him, she started to feel something else. Support. Validation. After nearly an hour of heated discussion, Dr. Langston finally agreed to review the security footage from the classroom. Her dad insisted on watching it with him, and reluctantly, the principal complied. They gathered in a small room filled with monitors. As the video played, her dad's jaw tightened. There it was, clear as day. The girl sneaking up behind her, grabbing her hair, cutting it off. The teacher, walking in moments later and scolding her. The whole thing unfolded exactly as she'd described. "This is unacceptable," her dad said, pointing at the screen. "You have proof right here. Why wasn't this reviewed sooner?" Dr. Langston rubbed his temples, looking defeated. I'll make sure proper actions are taken." Her dad wasn't satisfied. Proper actions sounded vague, like empty promises, so he took matters into his own hands. After leaving the school, he called a lawyer, a friend from his community activism days, and explained the situation. The lawyer listened carefully and assured him they had grounds to escalate the issue if needed. That evening, her dad sat her down again. "We're not done yet," he told her. "If the school won't do the right thing, we'll bring attention to this ourselves." She nodded, though part of her worried about making things worse. What if people judged her? What if the bullying intensified? But another part of her, the stronger part, felt ready to stand up, ready to fight. The next day, her dad contacted local news outlets and shared their story. He also reached out to community leaders who specialized in advocating for marginalized voices. Within hours, social media lit up with posts supporting her. Hashtags like #CounterProtectBlackHair and #OnJustice for Her spread quickly, drawing attention to the incident. At school, the atmosphere shifted. Some kids avoided her altogether while others approached her with kind words. One girl even apologized for laughing earlier, saying she hadn't realized how hurtful it was. Teachers seemed more cautious around her, as if afraid of saying the wrong thing. But the real turning point came when the school district released a statement acknowledging the incident and promising reforms. They announced mandatory training for staff on cultural sensitivity and anti-bullying measures. They also suspended the girl responsible and transferred her to another program. Still, her dad wasn't satisfied. He organized a meeting with parents, teachers, and students to discuss ways to create a safer environment for everyone. At the meeting, she spoke up for the first time since the incident. "I didn't ask for this," she said softly, gripping the microphone. "I didn't want any of this to happen. All I wanted was to be myself, to wear my hair the way it grows naturally. But now I realize this isn't just about me. It's about every kid who feels scared to be themselves because of bullies or unfair rules. We deserve better." The room erupted in applause. For the first time in weeks, she felt heard, seen, respected. That night, as she lay in bed, she thought about everything that had changed. Her dad's determination had sparked a movement, not just for her, but for others like her. She still had a long road ahead, but for the first time, she felt hopeful. Hopeful that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. The days after the school district's statement felt surreal. One moment, she was just another student trying to get through middle school. The next, she was at the center of something much bigger than herself. People were talking about her, not in whispers or cruel jokes, but in ways that made her feel seen and supported. It was strange, but also empowering. Her dad had become a whirlwind of energy, organizing meetings, giving interviews, and connecting with people who shared their story. He wasn't just fighting for her anymore. He was fighting for every child who'd ever been told they weren't good enough because of how they looked or acted, and slowly others began joining him. At first, she stayed quiet during these events. She listened while her dad spoke, watched as strangers nodded along, and felt grateful that someone else was carrying the weight for her. But then, one evening, something shifted. It started with a phone call. Her dad answered, his face lighting up as he listened. When he hung up, he turned to her with a grin. "That was Ms. Carter," he said. "She runs a local youth group. She wants you to speak at their meeting tomorrow." Her stomach dropped. "Me? Why me?" "Because your voice matters," he replied simply. "You've been through this. You know what it feels like. No one can tell your story better than you." She hesitated. Public speaking wasn't exactly her thing. In fact, the thought of standing in front of a room full of people terrified her. But there was something in her dad's eyes, a mix of pride and belief, that made her nod reluctantly. The next day, she found herself sitting in a small community center surrounded by teenagers and adults. Some of them smiled encouragingly when she walked in, while others greeted her with hugs. Ms. Carter introduced her warmly, explaining why her story mattered and how it could inspire change. When it was her turn to speak, she stood up, clutching the microphone tightly. Her hands trembled and her voice wavered at first, but as she began to talk, the words came easier. She told them about the bullying, the way her hair had been cut off in class, and how the teacher had blamed her instead of helping her. She talked about feeling invisible, powerless, and alone. "I didn't think anyone would care," she admitted, looking out at the crowd. "I thought I was overreacting, that maybe it really was my fault somehow. But now I know it wasn't. None of this was my fault." The room erupted into applause before she even finished. People stood up, cheering and clapping. Tears streamed down her face, not from sadness this time, but from relief, from validation. For the first time, she realized just how many people understood what she'd gone through. How many people had faced similar struggles themselves. Afterward, a line formed as people waited to thank her. A teenage boy with curly hair hugged her and whispered, "Thank you for saying what I couldn't." An older woman handed her a tissue and said, "You're braver than you know, sweetheart." By the end of the night, she felt lighter. Not healed. There was still pain, but stronger, more resilient. and most importantly, less alone. Back home, her dad hugged her tightly. "See," he said, "your voice has power." She smiled faintly, though doubts still lingered. Yes, people cared now. But would anything really change? Would kids stop teasing each other? Would teachers learn to listen instead of dismiss? These questions kept her awake long after everyone else had gone to bed. Over the next few weeks, things continued to evolve. Her dad partnered with Ms. Carter and other advocates to create workshops for students and teachers alike. They focused on topics like empathy, cultural awareness, and standing up against injustice. Slowly, she noticed a difference in her own school, too. Teachers seemed more mindful of their words. Students who once laughed at her now offered kind smiles or nods of solidarity. Even the principal, Dr. Langston, made an effort to check in with her regularly, asking how things were going and if she needed anything. But perhaps the biggest change came from within her. As she saw the impact of her story, she began to embrace her identity more fully. She stopped hiding her hair under scarves or hats. Instead, she styled it proudly, letting it be big and bold and unapologetically hers. Friends complimented her, calling her hair beautiful. Strangers approached her, asking for styling tips or sharing their own stories about embracing natural hair. One afternoon, she sat with her best friend outside during lunch. They laughed about silly things, memes, music, random inside jokes. For a moment, life felt normal again, happy even. "You've changed so much," her friend said suddenly, tilting her head. "Not just your hair, but you. You seem stronger somehow." She thought about that for a second. "Yeah," she admitted. "I guess I am." Her friend grinned. "Good. About time you owned it." Later that week, her dad announced another milestone, a new policy proposal being presented to the school board. If passed, it would ban discriminatory practices based on hairstyles and require schools to implement stricter anti-bullying measures. He invited her to attend the meeting, assuring her she wouldn't have to speak unless she wanted to. On the day of the meeting, she dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that made her feel confident. Her dad wore his usual suit, looking sharp and determined. Together, they walked into the crowded room where parents, teachers, and students had gathered to show their support. As the discussion unfolded, she listened intently. Speakers talked about the importance of representation, inclusion, and respect. One mother tearfully recounted how her son had been teased for wearing braids. Another teacher shared stories of students feeling pressured to conform to Eurocentric beauty standards. Each testimony added fuel to the fire, reinforcing the need for change. When the floor opened for public comments, her dad nudged her gently. "Do you want to say something?" She hesitated, glancing around the room. So many eyes were watching, waiting. Could she do it? Did she have the courage? Finally, she nodded. Standing up, she took a deep breath and stepped forward. The microphone felt cold beneath her fingers, but her voice rang clear. "I never thought something as simple as my hair could cause so much trouble," she began. "But it did. And not just for me, for a lot of us. We shouldn't have to choose between being ourselves and fitting in. We shouldn't have to hide who we are to avoid getting hurt." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "This policy isn't just about hair. It's about fairness, about respect, about making sure every kid feels safe and valued in school. That's all I ever wanted, to belong." The room erupted into applause once more. People cheered, some wiping away tears. Even members of the school board nodded approvingly. By the end of the meeting, the proposal received unanimous approval. Walking out of the building, she felt a sense of accomplishment she'd never experienced before. Change was possible. Hard-fought, yes, but possible. Her dad wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Proud of you, kiddo. You're changing the world one step at a time." She smiled, finally believing him. The weeks following the school board meeting felt like a whirlwind of emotions. On one hand, there was excitement. Real, tangible progress was happening. The new policy banning discrimination based on hairstyles had been officially implemented district-wide. Teachers were required to attend training sessions on cultural sensitivity. and students were encouraged to participate in workshops about bullying and self-acceptance. But on the other hand, she couldn't shake the lingering fear that things might not stick. Policies were great on paper, but changing minds wasn't as simple as signing documents or holding meetings. People could still whisper behind her back. They could still judge her for being different. She knew deep down that true change took time and patience, but some days doubt crept in anyway. Still, she tried to focus on the positives. Her dad reminded her daily that they'd already come so far. Change doesn't happen overnight, he'd say, but every step counts. And he was right. Every day brought small victories. Kids who once teased her now nodded respectfully when they passed her in the hallways. A few even apologized, saying they hadn't realized how hurtful their words had been. One boy admitted that his older brother used to mock him for wanting to grow out his curls, but seeing her stand up for herself gave him the courage to embrace his own hair too. Her best friend noticed the shift too. "You're kind of a role model now," she joked one afternoon as they walked home from school. "People look up to you." She laughed nervously. "I'm just trying to survive middle school." Her friend rolled her eyes. "Yeah, well, surviving isn't all you're doing. You're inspiring people, even if you don't see it." Inspiration wasn't something she ever imagined for herself. Growing up, she'd always been the quiet one, the girl who blended into the background, hoping no one would notice her. Now, whether she liked it or not, she stood out. And while part of her wished she could go back to being invisible, another part of her realized that standing out wasn't such a bad thing after all. One Friday evening, her dad came home buzzing with energy. He held up his phone, showing her a message from Ms. Carter. "Guess what?" he said, grinning. "They want you to speak at a community rally this weekend." Her heart sank. Another speech? She'd managed to get through the last few without completely falling apart, but public speaking still terrified her. What if she froze? What if she said the wrong thing? Her dad must have seen the panic in her eyes because he quickly added, "You don't have to do it if you don't want to. But think about it. How many kids your age get the chance to make a difference like this?" That question stuck with her. How many kids did get opportunities like this? Most people went their whole lives without stepping into the spotlight, let alone using it to help others. Maybe she didn't feel ready, but maybe she didn't have to be. Maybe doing something scary was worth it if it meant helping someone else feel less alone. By Saturday morning, she'd made up her mind. She picked out her favorite outfit, a bright yellow top that matched her confidence, or at least the confidence she hoped to fake, and styled her hair carefully. Big, bold, unapologetic. As she looked in the mirror, she whispered to herself, "You've got this." The rally was held in a park downtown, where hundreds of people had gathered under colorful banners reading, "Empower every child," and "Celebrate diversity." Families picnicked on blankets, children played tag near the stage, and speakers took turns sharing stories of resilience and hope. When it was her turn, her dad gave her a reassuring pat on the back. "You'll knock 'em dead," he said softly. She climbed the stairs to the stage, her legs wobbling slightly. The crowd clapped politely as she approached the microphone, but she barely heard them over the pounding in her chest. For a moment, she just stood there, staring out at the sea of faces. Some smiled encouragingly. Others waited patiently for her to begin. Finally, she took a deep breath and spoke. "When I first started growing out my hair, I thought it would make me happier," she began, her voice trembling at first. "I thought it would make me feel more like myself, and it did for a little while. But then, people started making fun of me. They called me names, laughed at me, told me my hair was ugly." She paused, swallowing hard. "For a long time, I believed them. I thought maybe they were right. Maybe I should change, maybe I should hide." A murmur rippled through the crowd, but she kept going. "But here's the thing. I didn't do anything wrong. Wearing my hair naturally isn't a crime. Being proud of who I am isn't a crime. None of us should have to shrink ourselves to fit someone else's idea of normal." Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "This movement isn't just about hair. It's about telling kids everywhere that it's okay to be different, that it's okay to stand out, that it's okay to take up space. Because we all deserve to feel safe and valued, not just in school, but in the world. When she finished, the applause was deafening. People cheered, whistled, and clapped until their hands turned red. Strangers hugged her as she stepped off the stage, thanking her for speaking up. Parents introduced her to their kids, saying, "See? This is what bravery looks like." Later that night, as she lay in bed replaying the day in her mind, she realized something important. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for everyone who felt unseen, unheard, or unworthy. And knowing that made everything, even the fear, worth it. The next week at school, something remarkable happened. During homeroom, her teacher announced a new initiative, a Diversity Day celebration where students could showcase their cultures, traditions, and personal stories. Everyone was invited to participate, and teachers encouraged creativity. She immediately signed up, deciding to create a photo collage of Black hairstyles throughout history, from ancient African tribes to modern-day icons. As she worked on the project, she poured her heart into it, adding captions that explained the significance of each style. By the time Diversity Day arrived, her display was one of the most popular exhibits. Kids crowded around, asking questions and taking pictures. Some shared their own experiences with hair and identity, while others simply marveled at the beauty of the styles she'd highlighted. Even the principal stopped by to compliment her work. "You're making history, young lady," he said warmly. "Keep it up." History. The word lingered in her mind long after the event ended. Was she really making history? Or was she just doing what any kid would do if given the chance, to stand up, speak out, and demand better? Maybe it was both. That night, as she scrolled through social media, she stumbled across a post from a girl in another state. The caption read, "Because of her, I wore my afro to school today. Thank you for showing me it's okay to be me." Tears filled her eyes as she stared at the photo, a smiling girl with a big, beautiful afro standing tall and proud. For the first time, she truly understood the ripple effect of her actions. Change wasn't just about policies or speeches. It was about moments like this, moments where someone saw themselves in her story and found the courage to shine. Her dad knocked lightly on her bedroom door before peeking inside. "Everything okay?" She nodded, showing him the post. "Look." He smiled, pride shining in his eyes. "See? You're changing lives." She grinned back, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. Changing lives sounded like a lot of responsibility, but maybe it wasn't so scary after all. Maybe it was just about being brave enough to show up as yourself and letting others follow your lead. Months had passed since that first day when she walked into school with her afro high and proud. So much had changed, not just in her life, but in the lives of others too. The movement sparked by her story had grown beyond what anyone could have imagined. People from all over were sharing their own experiences, posting photos of themselves embracing their natural hair, and celebrating diversity in ways that felt powerful and real. But for her, the biggest change was within herself. She wasn't the same girl who used to shrink into the shadows hoping no one would notice her. Now she carried herself differently, with confidence, pride, and a quiet strength she didn't know she had. Her dad often joked that he couldn't keep up with her anymore, but deep down he looked at her with awe. She'd become someone who inspired even him. One crisp autumn morning, her dad sat her down at the kitchen table. He slid a newspaper across to her, pointing at an article on the front page. "Take a look," he said, his voice filled with excitement. The headline read, "Local Middle School Leads Nationwide Push for Inclusive Policies." Below it was a picture of her standing in front of her Diversity Day display, smiling brightly as kids gathered around her exhibit. The article talked about how her story had ignited a wave of change, not just in her school district, but across the country. Other districts were adopting similar policies, hosting workshops, and encouraging open conversations about identity and acceptance. She stared at the photo, half amazed and half embarrassed. "I didn't think it would go this far," she admitted softly. Her dad chuckled. That's the thing about courage. It spreads faster than fear. As she flipped through the rest of the paper, she noticed another section dedicated entirely to student voices. Quotes from kids like her filled the pages, stories of overcoming bullying, finding self-love, and standing up for what's right. One quote stood out to her. Because of her, I stopped hiding my braids under a hat. Because of her, I learned to love myself exactly as I am. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she quickly wiped them away before her dad noticed. For so long, she'd doubted whether speaking up mattered, whether fighting back was worth the pain it caused along the way. But reading those words reminded her why she kept going, even when it felt impossible. At school, things weren't perfect, but they were better. Kids still teased each other sometimes, but teachers intervened more consistently. Now, students participated in regular discussions about kindness and respect, learning to see differences not as flaws but as strengths. Even the girl who had cut her hair apologized publicly during one of these sessions, saying she regretted her actions and wanted to do better. It wasn't easy to forgive her, not completely, but she appreciated the effort. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant choosing to move forward without carrying bitterness. And moving forward was exactly what she planned to do. That afternoon, she met with Ms. Carter, the community leader who'd supported her from the beginning. Together, they brainstormed ideas for expanding their outreach program. They wanted to create safe spaces where kids could share their struggles, celebrate their identities, and find mentors who understood what they were going through. We'll call it Roots, Ms. Carter suggested. Like your hair, it's about staying grounded while growing strong. She loved the name. Roots symbolized connection, history, and resilience, all things she'd come to value deeply. Over the next few weeks, they worked tirelessly to bring the idea to life. Flyers went up around town, social media posts spread the word, and soon enough, dozens of families signed up to participate. The first Roots meeting took place in the community center where she'd spoken months earlier. Dozens of kids showed up, ranging from elementary students to high school seniors. Some came alone, nervous and unsure, while others brought friends or family members for support. Everyone was welcome. Ms. Carter opened the session with a warm, "Welcome," then turned the floor over to her. As she stood up to speak, she felt none of the nerves that used to grip her. Instead, she felt calm, ready. I used to think being different made me weak, she began, her voice steady and clear. I thought standing out was something to be ashamed of. But now I know better. Being different doesn't make us weak. It makes us strong. It gives us roots to hold on to when the world tries to knock us down. The room erupted into applause, and she smiled, feeling lighter than ever. Afterward, kids approached her one by one, sharing their stories and thanking her for inspiring them. A little boy with dreadlocks shyly handed her a drawing he'd made, a picture of two people holding hands beneath a rainbow. "For you," he whispered before running back to his mom. She held the drawing close, tears pricking her eyes again. Moments like this reminded her why she fought so hard, not for recognition but for connection, for hope. By spring, Roots had become a cornerstone of the community. Workshops, mentorship programs, and art exhibits celebrated diversity in all its forms. Her dad joked that she was becoming a local celebrity, but she shrugged it off. Fame wasn't the goal. Making a difference was. On the last day of school, she stood outside the building watching younger students rush past her, laughing and chatting excitedly about summer plans. She remembered being one of them, scared, uncertain, searching for belonging. Now she knew she belonged wherever she chose to stand. Her best friend joined her, grinning widely. "Pretty crazy, huh? You've come a long way." She nodded, smiling back. "Yeah, we both have." As they walked home together, she glanced up at the sky, letting the sun warm her face. Her hair bounced lightly against her shoulders, free and unapologetic. Somewhere along the way, she'd stopped seeing it as a source of trouble and started seeing it as a symbol of power, a reminder of where she came from and how far she'd come. When she got home, she found her dad waiting for her on the porch. He handed her a small box wrapped in colorful paper. "Open it," he urged, his eyes twinkling. Inside was a framed photo of her from the rally, the one where she stood tall and proud in front of hundreds of cheering supporters. Beneath it, engraved in gold lettering, were the words, "Courage starts small." She hugged him tightly, overwhelmed by gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. He kissed the top of her head. "No, thank you. You've taught me more than I ever taught you." That night, as she tucked the frame into a special spot on her dresser, she reflected on everything that had happened. The bullying, the fear, the fight. It all led her here, to a place where she felt whole, where she knew her worth. And though challenges lay ahead, she faced them with the same determination that got her this far. Because now, she understood something important. Courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about acting anyway. About planting roots and growing stronger, no matter what storms come your way. As she drifted off to sleep, she dreamed of big skies, bold colors, and endless possibilities. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, new battles, and new victories. But tonight she rested peacefully, knowing she'd already changed the world, one step, one strand, one brave moment at a time.